Okay, hi. You know what? I'm going to skip all the small talk because Richard Baxter totally inspired me last night. I was talking to him, and I was like, I don't really want to do an intro. I really just want to get to it. And he's like, Annie, don't do an intro. Nobody gives a shit. Just get to the good stuff. So that was very empowering. Thank you, Richard. All right, so what I'm going to do today is a live demo of some of my favorite tips and tricks in Excel. And all of these tips and tricks, they're things that they're very easy to do. I'm not going to be doing anything super advanced. We're not going to be using formulas, nothing like that. It's all stuff that, like, if you're just a normal person, unlike some of the data whores we have here, and you're dealing with data all the time, but you bring it into Excel and you're like, oh, what do I do now? I just want to make it sexy. I want to make it actionable. And it's going to be a fire hose. I'm going to move pretty fast through it. But at the end, I'm going to share a link to a blog post. It's a monster blog post on the Sierra blog. Don't waste your time going to it because it's password protected, because it's really not going to be valuable to anyone who's not here. But in that blog post, I have written out all of the instructions for everything that I'm going to show you today for both the PC and Mac, because their processes are quite different. Okay, so jumping right in, the first thing I'm going to show you is the quick access toolbar. Unfortunately for you Mac users out there, this is a PC swim only option. But if you're on a PC, it's something that very few people use, and I think it's because it's just tucked up here away from everything. But I use this all the time. This is an efficiency tip. But the first thing I do is I move it to below the ribbon, okay? Because I like to have it closer to where I'm actually working. The other problem with this is the two options they put in there are totally lame. But you can add anything you want to this quick access toolbar. And in the blog post, I have a list of all of the tools that I use all the time, and they're in my quick access toolbar. And I'll just show you really quickly how to add something. So I'm going to add grid lines, because if anyone has ever read anything that I've written about Excel, you've probably gotten the idea. I abhor grid lines. I hate them. They're ugly. They just add a bunch of static and noise to your data, and there's no need for them. And I'm going to show you other ways that will demarcate your data so you don't need grid lines. So just stop. So all you have to do is just right-click on whatever you want in the ribbon and choose Add to Quick Access Toolbar. And there it is. And with the grid lines, now I can just toggle them on and off. I never toggle them on. And I'm just also going to add this because I use this quite a bit too. Okay? All right, moving along. Next, I'm going to talk very, very briefly about table formatting. There are two things I do to any data set that I get, either that I download, export to CSV, or that people send me online. And the first thing I do is I always remove the grid lines because I hate them. The second thing I do is I always format everything as a table. It makes your life so much easier. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail for two reasons. One, I list all the steps in the blog post, but also I just last month did a blog post on search engine land, and it's very, very thorough on how to rock tables in Excel. Okay, so to format as a table, just click on any cell in your data set and go up here to Format as a Table, and you have all these formatting options. So it actually makes your data pretty, but it's also highly functional. So I'm just going to choose this one here. My table has headers, so I'm just going to click OK. Now, automatically, we've taken our data from a raw static data set and made it both Excel in form and function, because this is basically a database. Okay, you have all these options up here to sort and filter. Excel detects that this is text and gives you text filters. Over here, it detects that this is numbers, and it gives you a bunch of number filters. One thing to watch out for is this data here was pulled from Google Webmaster Tools, so you get a lot of funky monkey characters in there. And here you'll see that although these are numbers, you get text filters options. Okay, that's because Excel is interpreting this as text, and you know that because numbers are always right aligned. So if you ever see anything in a number column that's left aligned, that is text, even though it's a number. So it's that less than sign. So just get rid of the less than sign, or get rid of that data altogether, and you'll be okay. All right, so next thing I do is I just select all of the columns, and if you just right-click on any of these dividers, it'll auto-expand the columns for you. A couple other little things. If you want to move around in a table, there are a couple of shortcuts. So if you want to move down to any edges of the data set, you just hold down Control and hit the arrows. So Control down arrow is going to take you to the bottom. Control up arrow is going to take you back up, and right, left, so on and so forth. Now, if you want to actually select the whole column, especially if you have a large data set, like you export from Screaming Frog or something like that, it's going to take a long time to click and scroll down. Just add Shift into the mix, so Control Shift down arrow, and that's going to select the entire column. Another quick thing is once you have a table, if you just press Control A, Command A on a Mac, I'm going to move this up here, that's going to select all the data. If you press Control A again, it's going to include the headings, and if you press Control A again, it's going to select your whole sheet. So just by knowing some of those keyboard shortcuts, you can just start flying through your data. Okay, so that's all I'm going to hit on with that. All right, the next thing I'm going to talk about is custom cell formatting. I'm going to move this over here. Okay, so if you have a date in a cell, let's just say we have 7/26, most people know that you can change the formatting. Now, there is one little tip that I'm going to give you, that you can use this all throughout. Whatever you're doing in Excel, if you press Control 1, it's going to pull up formatting options. So if you're working with a cell, then it's going to pull up formatting options for the cell. If you're working with a chart and you have the whole chart selected, you're going to get formatting options for that. If you have, let's say the axis selected, it's going to pull up formatting options for that. So whatever you want to format, just select it and press Control 1. Okay, so I'm going to press Control 1, and whoops, that didn't work. Okay. Working with a new laptop. Okay. All right, so I'll just have to show it live then. So with this, I don't know why it did that. But if you want to reformat date, you have these set formats. But where the magic happens is this custom formatting. Okay, so just pretend that this is like formatted date up there. And here's how it works. So if you have 1M, I'll just start with month. Let's say the month of September. If you have 1M, that's going to give you 9. If you put in 2 M's, that's going to give you 0, 9. So it's going to give you a leading 0 if it's less than 10. If you put in 3 M's, it's going to give you SEP. If you put in 4 M's, it's going to spell out September. Same with day. If you put in 1D, it's going to give you just the number. If you put in 2, it's going to give you the leading 0 if it's less than 10. If you put in 3, it's going to give you the first 3 letters of the day of the week. So you could put January 27th, 2014, and it's going to tell you, oh, that's Thursday. So it's going to give you THU. If you put in 4 Ds, it's going to spell out Thursday. I'll just pull up this other file to show you what it looks like. No, I won't. Okay, so you can see it in the blog post. This just got completely borked, so I'm just going to move on. In the blog post, I also show some really advanced options, and this sucks that it's not working. Okay. All right, moving on. I will say this, you can also format by color. So you can say, okay, I want positive numbers to be green, I want negative numbers to be red, and 0 to be black. I do this with like Google Webmaster Tool data, where I just have a bunch of positive and negatives. Like just having a minus sign doesn't really make the data jump out at me. So what I'll do is you just do Control 1, and if you can see it, you have these color options, and I provide links in the blog post for you to learn more. But you could put green in brackets, and then the next part of it is you just put in however you want the number formatted. So if it's just a straight number with no decimals, you just put 0. If you want a decimal, you put 0.0. If you want a percentage, you put 0%, so on and so forth. And then you separate them with a semicolon. So the first number is a positive number, semicolon, negative, however you want to format the negative number, semicolon, and then 0 if you have that option. And you can get really advanced with it. I wish this had worked, but you can even say, if the number is less than 1,000, I want to have the word low in there. And this is how you're going to format it. And if it's greater than 2,000, I want the word high, and then some leading spaces, and then 0. And to get those leading spaces where you'll have the low on the left side and the number on the right, you just put asterisks, and then whatever you want repeated for the full width of the column. In this case, I have a space, so it's asterisks, and then a space, and then whatever it is for whatever's not less than 100, less than 1,000, or greater than 2,000. Okay, moving on. All right, next I'm going to talk about links and tabs. So most people know that you can add a link in Excel to an external document, but what they don't know is that you can also add links to other tabs within your document. So if you just press Control-K, Command-K on the Mac, and choose Place in the document, then you see all the tabs that I have for the document, and you just either double-click or click it and click OK. Then that's going to give you that link, and when you click on it, it's going to open that tab. And then also with your tabs, you can also add colors to them. So if you just right-click, you can choose a tab color. But you might be looking at this and going, Annie, what kind of lame sandwich are you feeding us? Like, that's nothing. But here's what you can do with just those simple principles. So here is a screenshot of a dashboard I created. And with the table of contents over here, I had to do a screenshot because I had to blur out client data. But over here on the left, these are all links to the individual sheets. And even the action items and the wins and the links below the charts, those all are links to those individual sheets, so that usually like the C levels, they're just mostly going to look at the dashboard and see any indicators that they need to check into, and then move on. And then down the food chain, they're going to be more interested in the minutia. And then this dashboard actually kind of goes on ad nauseum and represents all the different departments of services. And then what I did was I color coordinated the tabs with the different departments. So we had consulting, campaign management, content production, and content promotion and production. And so you can, just with these two simple things, you can get really, you can create some really sexy data. Basically what you're doing is putting it in stilettos and making it work the pole here. So, okay, so next up, I'm going to talk about charts, okay? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a combination chart where I'm going to combine visits and bounce rate. Now, it's easy to combine two metrics that are very similar, but visits and bounce rate, you have visits as high as 65,000, bounce rate is less than 1 because it's a decimal. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold down the Control key, select bounce rate, and then go to Insert, Column, just a basic column chart over here. Drag it down. And it's going to look really ugly before it gets sexy, but trust me, it'll be awesome. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, you have all these formatting options up here. I'm kind of partial to this one. It adds a little bit of swagger without getting too distracting. And then next, we're going to select the bounce rate series. This is called a data series. and clean that up. Now, if you have difficulty selecting the series because it's so small, you can always go up here to Chart Tools and check out Layout or Format, and they have this little option up here in the upper left-hand corner where you can select individual series. So I've had to do that. I used to actually dial up one of the numbers so I could grab it and then dial it back down. But this is a lot easier. So once you have it up, again, I'm going to press Control-1 to get to the formatting options. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take bounce rate and I'm going to put it on a secondary axis. Okay? Now, it's going to look really, really ugly and hideous for a second. But then what we're going to do is we're going to go to the Design tab, change the chart type, and I'm going to make this a line graph with markers. Okay? So now, what I tend to do, and I think that this is a good practice to follow, the smaller number I always put on the secondary axis. So I have the column chart, and then the bigger numbers in the column charts, and that's represented on the primary axis, and then the smaller number I put off to the side. And I also like to use a line chart for smaller numbers and the columns for the larger numbers. So I don't like how thick these lines are. So again, I just clicked the series, did Control-1, and we're just going to adjust that. So I'm going to dial back the width of that line. I tend to like about 2.75. You can change the line color. You can mess with marker options. You can get all kinds of slutty with it. OK, so the next thing I'm going to show you is, and this is cool. I just discovered this like probably about 4 months ago. Has anyone ever tried to add a data series to a chart after you've already created it? It is a total pain. Like every time I go to do it, I'm like, wait, what am I supposed to do here? Like you're supposed to right click, select data, and go in here, and it's just madness and ugly. But there's a little shortcut that's awesome. So what we're going to do, the reason I'm adding this is when I show data, like I like to show visits and bounce rate vis-a-vis together on the same chart, and other things like revenue and conversion rates, because you can just see how they coexist, you know, in the little data set there. So, but if you're showing this to someone who doesn't live and breathe data, you know, they can look at this and go, okay, I get that Charlie Sheen costume, that's probably not good because that's really high, but what's an ideal bounce rate? So I usually vacillate between 30 and 40%. So what we're going to do is we're going to add this column to the chart very easily. All I'm going to do is select it, copy, select the chart, and just paste it in. Ridiculous, right? OK, so then what we're going to do is, obviously, I don't like that formatting. And it's very hard to select that one. So I'm going to go up here and choose target bounce rate. Press. Oh, one little tip with this is you have to deselect before this works, before you can press the Control-1. OK, so I'm going to select this again. You get these chart tools anytime you click the chart. So I'm going to go to Layout, Target Bounce Rate, Control-1, and I tend to like these lines. I definitely like them nice and thin, and I make them dash. That's just, you know, my personal preference, and I don't really want it to be that bright green, so I'm just going to make it a little more subtle with gray. And oops, go back in, and I'm going to turn off the markers. So I go to Marker Options, None. And you can see here, that didn't give me the dots, but you can see here now we have this. It's over here in the legend. All is good. Now, what you want to always do with a chart is you want to add a title to it, and you want to make it as descriptive as possible. The way you get to that is you just go to Layout, Chart Title. I like to do it above the chart, and I usually make them a lot more specific, but I'm just going to say, for the interest of time, top keywords. Now what I'm going to do is just kind of clean things up a little bit. My personal preference is I don't like the legend to be off to the right. I think it just kind of makes everything a little off kilter. So I generally move it to the bottom, but we have a thick and chewy cookie down here, so I'm not going to move it to the bottom. I'm actually going to move it to the top. So again, Control 1, move this to the top, and I also like to bounce, dial up the font size a little bit. Then one other thing is, I don't like, because I really want the important data to stand out, I don't like a lot of noise in my charts, in my data at all. So having these decimals is definitely noisy, and it's not necessary. The reason why we have them is there were decimals in the original data set. If you remove the decimals from the original data set using the number formatting options, then it won't be in your chart. But we didn't do that. So what we're going to do is just go to number and say decimal places 0. I don't want any decimals. And then another cool thing you can do is, like in this case, you don't really need every 10%. You don't need a major marker at every 10%. It gets a little noisy. This is personal preference. But I'm just going to air that out a little bit. So you just go to major unit under axis options, and I'm going to bump that up to 20%. And you'll see it just kind of airs things out. This is especially important if you're charting out data like over a period of a month and you have every day of the month along the x-axis. That gets ridiculously noisy. So you just select it, select the axis down there, and do Control 1. And I just do every other day. So there it will say the major marker is 1, and I bump it up to 2. So these things go a long way toward just kind of cleaning things up for you. And then what I do is I don't like to make clients read, because they don't. I was in-house, I'd get long reports, I wouldn't read them. You know, I would look at, you know, what would actually save my butt the next time I go into a meeting with the C-levels, and pull those out, take screenshots, you know, whatever. So what I like to do is just take the things that I really want to point out or explain, and I'll use these. This is doing this because I created these boxes ahead of time. Oh, and one little tip here, when you create these boxes, I'll show you how. Make sure you create them outside the chart. If you create them inside the chart, you're going to be constrained to stay within the perimeter of the chart, okay? So you just get to these by insert and shapes. And one thing most people don't know is all of these shapes, you can add text to them. So you just drag them out and start typing, and you can add text. And then you have all these formatting options. Again, because I don't like to draw attention away from the data, I try to make them as subtle as possible. So I really like this one here. It's this option, well, in here, shapes. One of these down here. Oh, yeah, this one. I don't know if you can see that. Because it's very, very subtle. But you know, you can use whatever you want. Okay, so, oh, and then one other quick little tip. All right, so let's say you have a data set over here. One thing that you can do, and this is a hack. This isn't something that Excel built in, although it should. You can make it look like your title updates automatically when you add data. And that's one more benefit to formatting as a table, because if you add new data to a table, then it automatically absorbs it into the table. And when I put the number in here, you'll notice it's 70,000 right now. When I enter it, it updates up here. Okay? So the way that you do that is you just go ahead and I'm going to hold down the Shift key to keep it constrained when I drag it down. But this is just a cell where I wrote revenue for June. And then this one here just references this cell here. So you just put equals AH36 because that's where the total is. And then what I did was I just dragged the chart over top, bump it down a little bit, and did Control 1. And just set it to no fill, because it's usually a white fill for the chart anyway, and your background is white, so no one's the wiser, and that's just kind of sexy. But okay, moving along to conditional formatting. I love conditional formatting. I'm just going to show you a few things here. The first thing is, this data here is from Screaming Frog, and one of the metrics that they have is a hash value. I'm not going to go into the details, but 2 pages with the same hash value is kind of like a social security number for web pages. If they have the same hash value, it's most likely the same page or very close to identical, and Google and Bing would most likely identify it as duplicate content. So what I'll do is Control-Shift, down arrow, and you can find conditional formatting under the Home tab, and you just go to Conditional Formatting, highlight cell rules, and we're going to choose duplicate values. Now, usually I use yellow highlighting, but just for the sake of time, I'm just going to stick with that. And what that does is it highlights all of the duplicates. Then what you can do is use the sorting function, sort A to Z, which is just alphabetically. Actually, first what I'm going to do is sort by color. And what that does is it moves all of the color cells that we just formatted up to the top, so they float to the top. And then we're going to do a custom sort here. And we'll say sort by color first, then we add a level and set this to hash, values A to Z. And now it will first, all the pink cells will move to the top, and then Excel will put those in alphabetical order so you can actually see which 2 pages belong together. Okay? All right, another thing you can do with conditional formatting are data bars. I love data bars. So let's say you're not going to chart something out because it's just too large of a data set. Data bars, you get to them by going conditional formatting, data bars. And it's just a really easy way to kind of make your data stand out, so like the larger values. And you can do this, like I do this a lot with Google Analytics data, where I'll just have some data bars, and then you can kind of eye it out and see which values are larger and smaller. And if you have outliers, there are special settings where you can get rid of the outliers. All right, one other thing that I'll just mention is, okay, so with number formatting, what I like to do is, if the number is either positive or negative and it doesn't rely on something else, I like to use number formatting. Remember, you go into Control 1 and set those colors. Again, there's a link in the blog post where you can learn how to do that. And you can use conditional formatting for that, and I used to, but conditional formatting is a processing hog. So if you can use number formatting, I would recommend that. But if you want, one thing that conditional formatting is good for is, let's say you want to compare 2 values, and you just want to show if something has gone up or gone down. That you can use conditional formatting for, to make the numbers red and green. I use this for rank reports, for analytics data, for webmaster tool data, and I added in this extra column, but you can see here we have the previous average position and the current average position. So in this case, we want a smaller number since we're dealing with rankings. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into conditional formatting. Now you can do this with a formula, but like I said, I'm going to keep all of this super simple. So you can go to highlight cell rules and say greater than. So we're going to format this number here to be red if it's greater than the previous number. So what we do here is we just reference this cell, and we're going to unlock the 4. I don't have time to go into all the details of why we're doing that, and this back button isn't working. Okay, let me try this. Oops. All right, let's start over. Okay, oops. We're going to select that cell, get rid of the $sign, and we're going to make the text red. Then we're going to go back in, If it's less than, that's a positive thing. We're going to reference that cell again. Get rid of the $sign. 4. Oops. And this time, we're going to, I'm going to go back, edit the rule, and format it as green, because that's positive. And get rid of no color. Okay, this isn't working. All right, scratch that. Yeah, I go through the details in the blog post. I don't know what's going on with that. All right, the last thing I'm going to touch on is data validation. But I'll just say, going back to that, what will happen is once you set all of that up, then you can either use this little format painter up here and apply it to the rest of the column, or you can drag the column down and just choose format only. And again, I go through all of the steps. I don't know what's wrong with this keyboard, or what's wrong with me. Okay, the last thing I'm going to touch on is data validation. So data validation gives you the ability to put drop-downs in your data so that, let's say you're tracking link building and other people are entering data into your Excel sheet, and if they add an extra space or they misspell like the link type or whatever, when you import that to Raven, if you use Raven, that's really going to muck up your records. And then someone's going to have to go through there and figure out why these are coming up as 2 separate link types, even though they're the same. So one way to deal with that is to add some data validation, which basically restricts their options. Okay, so the default is any value. We're going to change that to list. And then off to the side here, I usually with Excel, I'll just put the list that I want to use for the data validation way off to the side where no one will see it, and then reference it here. And then you'll see we have a drop down here with all of the options. So you can just choose from those. Okay, so that's all I have for the demonstration. Sorry about some of the mix-ups there. If you want to learn more, you can go to bit.ly/, do we have that slide? /Annie-MozCon. And so bit.ly/Annie-MozCon, and the password is MozCon. Okay, when you get in there, again, you'll see all of the instructions. And I also have a ton of links. Everything that I show you, I give you links to learn more for how to do it in PC and more for how to do it in Excel, a link to my search engine land post, and also a link to download the Excel file. Okay, so.
You're my hero right now, because not only are you going over all this Excel stuff, which I love, but you can talk about Excel and stilettos, putting on stilettos and working the pole in the same conversation. Or as Ian tweeted, working the pool, which could be interesting. I don't know what that means, but still trying to process that one. So we're going to do some Q&A. Do you guys, anyone have some questions? So raise your hand, old style. Rand's got one. I can't see otherwise, but I've got tons, by the way.
Awesome.
We're going to have to hang out.
I added those dashboards just for you.
So, Annie, can you maybe list for us the top 3 or 4, or even just a couple of the reports that you build in Excel kind of for every client, and why they work so well? Like, what inspires action about them? So I'm really curious about like the specific, you know, I show rankings next to traffic, or I show links next to rankings, or whatever it is.
Right. Actually, that's a really good question. And and I was afraid I was going to run out of time, so I didn't show this, but can we put this, can we put the computer back up? So with this dashboard, whenever this goes back up, the AV team's going to hate me. Okay, so with the dashboard, here are, these are what I added for Laura, because she told me that she was dealing with dashboards. And here are some of the reports that, like, these are some of my favorites. So, so one thing that I'll do that I really, really like, let's say you're doing link building over a period of time. And I didn't touch on pivot tables, but I love pivot tables. I wrote a blog post just a couple weeks ago on Search Engine Land on pivot tables. Just search for it. You guys should be able to handle that. I mean, really, you could just put in Annie Cushing Excel, and you know, I'd probably take up the first 2 pages of Google. But what I did here was I broke down all the links that we were building. I dumped them into a pivot table and then put them in a pivot chart and showed them 2 different ways. So I showed like by the anchor text, and I had to blur it out, but those were the anchors of the individual links, and then the months that we built for them. And then I also showed it like links broken down by month. So these were the months, and you can see kind of the ebb and flow of the link building. And then over here, represented by the colors, were all the different anchors. And then we also had some social reports. And so basically, like it really depends on the client. So like when I'm in the kickoff call, the whole time I'm talking to them or listening while someone else is talking to them, I'm thinking like, what makes this person tick? You know, so if they're like, oh, rankings for SAT prep, rankings for SAT, you know, you can kind of get an idea for what, like, you know, really floats their boat. And so I try to make a note of that and add those things to the reports. Another thing is definitely rankings. And one of my favorites is showing rankings and traffic in the same chart. I didn't want to get too complicated, but I actually had, with one client, they really had to focus on 5 keywords, and they wanted to see how effective they were over time, because they were kind of their cash cows. And so what I do is I set up a pivot chart, and if you don't know anything about pivot charts, you can just check out for this. But I used a report filter for the keywords, and then in the chart, I had the traffic as an area chart, and the rankings for Google over time, weekly, as a line chart, and then the rankings for Bing as a line chart. And then, you know, when you use a report filter, you just choose a new option, and it's magic. Like the whole Excel chart just updates. And so they could click on the individual keywords, and then everything in the chart would just update. You know, the traffic, the rankings. And so what they would do is just kind of like click back and forth, and they had all this historical data, you know, to look at.
Traffic. So speaking of rankings and traffic, do you ever pull data in for impression count from either GA or Webmaster Tools, and do you think either of those are reliable?
Oh, absolutely. You know, I used to, before not provided, I used to create these spreadsheets where I would show like the keyword volume and then all the Google Webmaster Tool data and then analytics, so I could show all the way from, you know, impression to clicks to conversions and revenue. Now, since, you know, not provided, you know, that's kind of useless. And I actually rely on Webmaster Tools data a lot more, the impression. You know, I'm sure it's not very accurate, but it's at least something. So what I tend to do is, you know, early on, before I know much about the client, I'll use SEMrush and just, you know, get a list of all the keywords that they're ranking on the first 2 pages of Google or Bing for, and then I'll look at their Webmaster Tools data and then compare those 2 data sets and kind of extrapolate that out. But I have to say, I've definitely, there is one other thing that I do. I'll click on the keywords in like the search queries report, drill down and look to see if 2 landing pages or more are competing against each other. You know, like if they're both optimized for the same term, or Google can't figure out which landing page to send to. But my focus has definitely become a lot more on landing pages. So I'll use keywords just because I know that's what they want to know. And then from there, it's just all, right, here are your cash cow landing pages. And we know from this fire hose of data that here are the keywords associated with those. Now let's work on getting more conversions and more traffic. Any other questions? Oh yeah, it's bit.ly/Annie-MozCon. Yeah, Annie-MozCon, and the password is just MozCon. The only reason I password protected it is I just, it's not going to be particularly useful for anyone who's not here at the conference.
That was good waving. That was
A fellow Excel whisperer.
What's up, Annie? So you and I a while ago had a Twitter conversation about visualizations and data visualizations, and you're pretty passionate about visualizing data well. I was wondering if you could give us like 2, 3, 4 visualizations that you see frequently that we should avoid. So like pie charts for specific kinds of data, something like that that you see people do all the time that you don't think is actionable, that doesn't get them anywhere, doesn't get buy-in from their bosses.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not a big fan of pie charts. They're okay with very, very small data sets. I do see pie charts used a lot. And especially now with the spate of infographics out there, they'll have lots and lots of different data series in one pie chart, and then they have lines pointing into the pie chart, so you kind of have to follow the line to figure out where it's supposed to be. So I see that as a really common mistake among marketers. So I don't recommend using pie charts except for very small data sets. I mean, this is just me, I mean, this isn't God speaking here. He doesn't care about data. But if you do have a small data set and you're using a pie chart, one thing I'll do is you could click on the line chart and choose that. You can also do that with the individual pieces of pie. And if you click once well, it's going to select everything. Click on it again, and it's just going to select that one thing. What I like to do is pull it out from the rest of the pie chart. So you'll have a pie chart like this, and then you have one piece of pie that's just pulled out a little bit. And then I'll use, the little text boxes and stuff and draw attention, to that. So that's effective. Really, the biggest mistake that I see is just way too much junk in the trunk, So you look at this chart and you just see all of this data, but you don't tell a story, So I mean, if you think about it, we're all really, really busy, and we try to get through things as fast as possible. And if you open up, a spreadsheet and you just have this huge table, which is definitely one of my annoyances. Tabular data just sucks, because you can't look at it and pull anything out. I mean, you can use conditional formatting and number formatting and, make the best of it. But for the most part, I really, really don't like tabular data. But the other thing is, just trying to put too much in there without telling me, what is it that you want me to know? What is it? And the biggest mistake I see is not telling me what you want me to do, So, they'll have something like, oh, bounce rate is high, but maybe I'll notice that, or maybe I won't. Maybe I'll notice that, the visits were really low for one of my pet keywords, So I really encourage you to, make sure if there's anything that's off, have something, and don't put it, in a paragraph at the bottom, because You don't read it. We don't read. We're marketers, you know, and C-levels are even worse. They don't read your stuff, you know. So I put it out there in their face and try to minimize all the other distractions so that it's like, this is what I need you to take action on. This is the glacier that's dead ahead. Or this is an opportunity. This is your cash cow. And this is what I want you to do. And so that's probably the biggest thing. That was impressive.
Just a quick, easy question. How do you present this data to your clients? And do you do it in a PDF? Do you email it to them? Do you upload it? Okay. That answers it.
Yeah, I really don't like PDFs because I like the client to be able to interact with it. Like with those charts that I showed you, the combination charts, if you hover over one of the points, it'll give you like the exact numbers. So what I like to do is, of course, you know, like get on the phone with them, explain what it is that they're going to be looking for. So if it's a monthly report, I like to explain, hey, this is what you're going to be getting. And I would give clients like instructions. Even like with the pivot charts and pivot tables, I included a tab that included instructions for how they could take the data and, you know, click and drag and do all that stuff. And I even did a YouTube video for them so that, you know, they could just watch like a quick 5-minute video of, hey, this is what you want to do, you know, if you want to manipulate it or you want to see it in a different way. So I think educating them is really important. And then, you know, I just send it to them as the CSV, I mean, not the CSV, oh God, not a CSV, the Excel file. And then one caveat, if you're working on a Mac, because I work on a PC at work and go home to a Mac, I hate Mac, Excel for Mac, they got their B team, there are quite a few options that you don't have, but the worst one is pivot charts don't work. You can't do pivot charts on a Mac. And it just blows big time because I love pivot charts. You can create a pivot table and create a regular chart from it, but you can't create a pivot chart. And if you have a report filter, it won't work on the Mac. You can see it, you can select it, but you can't actually, like nothing will happen when you select like the keyword that I referenced. So if they're, I'll ask them, are you using a Mac? And then I just make a mental note. All right, I'm not going to use pivot charts with report filters.
So cool.